Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of 2020 for the Day Zero podcast. This is episode 23. I'm Spectre. With me is Z. So yeah, first episode of the new year. I guess it could be I guess it could be the 0th episode of the new year if we're going that way. So we were, on break for a few weeks. I think 3 or 4 weeks. Due to like holiday stuff going on. And one of the things that I was doing was I was at CCC, the Chaos Communication Conference. So I figured it'd be cool to kind of open up the episode talking a bit about that, since it happened over the break. So it was a bit weird being in Germany. It was my first time traveling internationally, I guess, outside of like I've traveled to the U.S. before. For those who don't know, I'm Canadian, so I've traveled to the U.S., but it's very different flying to a different country where the native language isn't English. So it was kind of weird not being able to read any of the signs or anything like that. But it was a really cool conference. You've been to CCC before, Z, right? Like I know you've been there as a speaker. Have you went there as like
Yeah.
an attendee?
I was able to attend a little bit while I was there.
Yeah.
But Other than that, like I haven't gone apart from when I was speaking there.
Okay. I was just wondering like how much you were able to check out because I know sometimes like if I remember right, when you spoke there, you kind of had to fly there, speak, and then fly back pretty
Yeah,
quick, right? You didn't really get to spend long there.
I wasn't even there. I wasn't even in Germany for 24 hours.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was really cool. It was technically my second conference other than DEF CON, so I've been to DEF CON twice, and this was my first time at CCC. And I think I like CCC better. And the main reason for that is the assemblies stuff I think was really cool. Um, DEF CON doesn't really have like, do they have an equivalent to assemblies? Like I know they have what do you call them? Not vendor areas. Oh, like the villages, but like I don't. Is that's not really the same thing? I don't think. So
No, I mean, because CCC kind of pulls a bit more of a general crowd. Like it's not just hacking, and I think that
yeah,
kind of plays into it.
yeah. So the CCC assemblies, it's basically like this giant hall, and they have like I want to say like 100 tables, or like 100 areas rather. So there's like groups of tables, and then you can reserve like I think it's free. You just like book like an area at the assembly area, and then you can put your stuff there while you go to talks or go to other assemblies and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, the assemblies I thought was really cool. The talks were good. The one thing though was that the questions I noted weren't they were pretty bad for some reason. Because I remember you saying that like when you gave a talk there, you found the questions were actually pretty good
Yeah,
generally at CCC.
at least the questions that kind of came up after the talk. So you did the talk. There were so when we kind of had the official Q&A, like while still on stage, I had one issue. One guy couldn't quite understand his accent, but I kept trying to understand what he was asking. He was asking me about a piece of software that I had never heard of called NetSorb, which I guess is useful for doing some network RE. Actually sounded kind of interesting to take a look at, but I couldn't understand what he was saying, so I ended up wasting a bunch of time on that. But in the kind of after discussion, so step off down the stage, some people come up to ask some more questions. That's where like there's a really good discussion, really good questions. It's kind of in that period.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, some of the questions, like I remember in previous years too, because I watched some CCC talks, live streamed or archived, obviously, and like I don't know, the questions this year just seem to be like at a lower level than what I remember. Addressing something in chat, Mano Cherry, I hope I'm saying your name right. Saying big conferences really should have someone write and filter questions to prevent that. Um, I think part of the problem is it's pretty like it's live, right? So people are going up to the microphones and asking them immediately. I think if you start trying to like filter the questions, that can kind of impact that and cause delays in the questioning period, which would kind of suck.
It can, but it
Um,
can also speed it up. So I've seen that with debates actually, where you kind of have some Q&A at the end. So yeah, you have people. There's mentioned in chat. There have people queue up before the talk ends. Other things, having them write their questions down, only allowing one question to no back and forth. I mean, the back and forth can be nice and can be very useful, but at the same time, if you do limit it, there basically there are a lot of things that can go a lot better if you have, somebody without, much of an accent or a bit more of an understandable accent. I mean, obviously not everybody's. I mean, some of the talks are in German too, so I mean, it kind of goes the other way too.
Yeah. I mean, one other thing I have with that is if the person who's vetting the questions isn't familiar with the subject matter or very familiar with it, they might not be able to filter the questions as well. But
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say, to actually have them filter them out, but just, have somebody else maybe be the one reading them. Um,
yeah,
and then, as a speaker, you could basically say, like, that's not relevant or something. Like, you can basically reject a question if you want to. And I
yeah,
mean, it does cause problems. So that's where like actually approaching the speaker afterwards is more useful if you do want to have that back and forth. If you want to have a more in depth thing, afterwards you're able to approach speakers. You're able to ask those follow up questions.
yeah. And you mentioned something with like some of the talks being in German, which actually reminded me of something I forgot that I should bring up. One thing that's cool, I don't know if they had it in previous years, but this year they had like a live translation mumble for the German talks. So English speaking people could go to the German talks and then join the mumble on their phone, and they could actually get like a live translation of the talk. It was really neat, and I don't think I've ever heard of like anywhere else really doing that. So I don't know how good it was. I didn't try it. My I had some really bad jet lag, so I missed some of the talks. Like I missed some of the English talks. Never mind the German ones. But yeah, I heard from some people that it was like really good, and I thought that was cool too. Do you remember hearing about that in previous years, or is that something new? Do you know?
I remember hearing about something like that. I don't remember if it was actually at CCC or not, so I can't say with any confidence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the other big thing that was happening there was obviously, the CCC, CTF. I got to meet up with some people and I tried my hand at it a little bit. I was pretty, I wasn't playing it competitively. I checked out a few challenges on like the second last day and on the last day. And like I think I got one flag and I didn't submit it. I just wanted to like check out some of the challenges. Um, it was really hard. Teams that were 4 hours into it or so, and I think only one team, like the leading team, had only solved one challenge. So yeah, there were some really hard challenges in there. Some of them were cool. I remember there was a heap one that I think I told you a little bit about. So they had like they allocated or they had a UAF on the heap, but you had to do like a heap chunk fake, doing like a House of Spirit style attack. I didn't solve it, but it seemed like a pretty cool challenge. There were others
Yeah, I
though
do
that
remember you talking about that one. I mean, I'm a fan of seeing the, old heap stuff, all the House of attacks and all of that. I mean, I like to recommend that the paper Malloc Maleficarium and Days Maleficarium, which
yeah,
are kind of the papers covering that. And oh no, I've it way back in the day when that paper when Malloc Maleficarium first dropped, like that was kind of an eye opener paper for me. So I mean, I love hearing about the different heap attacks actually still being used because a couple of them are still in play.
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't really do too many heap attacks. I mostly go for like I don't attack the allocator itself, I guess, as much. So I might retroactively go back and try to solve that challenge because I think it could be like a cool learning experience. Could be useful later on. So maybe stream it. No, I don't know about that. But yeah, I thought the CTS stuff was pretty cool overall, and I think I heard some good feedback on it. People generally liked it. There was one I want to say Israeli team that like blew everyone else out of the water though. I think their score was like somewhere around 12,000, and the second team had like 6,000 or something. Like they had more than double the score of like the next best team. It was insane how good they were. I'm trying to remember the team name, but I can look up quickly on CTF time. Uh, but yeah, it was kind of crazy, like how hard the CTF was, and then you just see this one team kind of blowing ahead. And that Paston. So I've heard from some people that were attending, like they're a team that's done good at CCC in the past. They've kind of like used that as their like DEF CON qualifying event. I guess that's where they pour all their resources into in terms of CTF. But yeah, so overall, I like the conference. I think I will be going again next year. One thing I won't miss though, and one thing that's gonna suck every time I go there is the flight time. It was around like 10 hours or 11 hours combined for me between two flights. Uh, man, it was brutal. With like how much it really messed me up time wise. And then you also have to consider the time for CCC in terms of the year. It's it's after Christmas. It's like 27th, I think. So I had to fly out the day after Christmas, and then I arrived the 27th. So I was operating on like probably like 30 plus hours without sleep, and man, it just messed me up. But like, yeah, outside of like the plane stuff and the jet lag, CCC was really cool, and I think I'll be going again next year.
Yeah, I mean, I like the conference. The main reason I haven't been able to go is because I do some stuff kind of right over that period. I mean, kind of the holiday period, there is a rough time to, just fly over to Europe and fly back. So I usually am kind of occupied from like the 28th to the 1st.
Yeah.
But I mean, otherwise, like I said, I do like the conference. Part of that does have to do, as like I mentioned earlier, just with the wider audience that pulls in and the wider topics that it'll pull in. It'll pull in some of the related but softer topics, so like privacy stuff and things like that, which some of the more technical or technically oriented conferences just don't do.
It has a lot more like meta and political discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing for CCC that like the reason I probably liked it was when I went to DEF CON last year. It was insanity. I think there was like 32,000 people.
Yeah, CCC isn't anywhere near as big.
No, I think I heard a figure somewhere around 15,000.
Yeah, but CCC is the older of the two.
Oh, it is, yeah. It's 10 years older, I think, exactly, because this was 36C3, and last year was DEF CON. No, last year was 27, so it's not exactly 10 years. But like, yeah, it was a very big center. It was the Messe, and for that amount of people, it was perfect. There was people, but like you were able to move without being packed like sardines in a can in the hallways. So that was really nice about it. And that is one thing too. Like, to be fair, that is one thing that's kind of a guarantee with CCC, is because of the way they do ticket sales. It's a lot more controlled. Whereas with DEF CON, it's obviously cash at the door, line up at LineCon, and then you can just get as many people in there, as possible. Whereas CCC, they drop them in stages and they can control it a lot better. So yeah, overall, nice, good thoughts at CCC. So I guess we'll move on to some news, because I don't have too much more to add on that. The only other thing I wanted to ask was, do you think you'll be able to try to make it next year? See?
Sorry, I wouldn't make any promises on that. In fact, if I were to, it would be another kind of whirlwind trip over there. So like I mentioned, the last time I was there, like I spent less than 24 hours in country. Part of that was due to getting held up at customs, missing my connecting flight, which only left once a day, so I had to wait 24 hours. So I would have been there closer to 48 instead of closer to 24, but no, I mean, the likely case is I won't make CCC, but I am hoping to hit up a few, more North American conferences this year.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason was I was thinking of doing like a day zero assembly next year at CCC, but if you're not able to go, then no, maybe not. I don't know. Talk about that closer to that. One question I'll address from chat before we move on to news was, which is closer? Vegas for me is about a 6-hour flight, so Vegas is closer. Yeah, so Vegas is a little bit closer. All right. So in terms of news, the first thing is kind of heartbreaking. It's Python 2.7, or Python 2 in general. It's going away, dude. They're sunsetting it. So yeah, for those of you who don't know, Python it'd be hard not to know, I guess. Python 2 has been they've been trying to like phase it out for a little while. A lot of people have been reluctant to upgrade to Python 3. I actually have been making the upgrade. All the scripts that I've written recently, if possible, I've been writing in Python 3. It is a lot easier now than it was probably a year or two ago, because there were a lot of like modules and stuff that broke on Python 3, or they didn't want to update,
Yeah, that
whatever.
just didn't go and support it. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken here. So I haven't been a heavy user of Pwn tools, but I feel like they were a little bit slow to update to Pi 3 also.
Yep, they were. Actually, I was going to bring that up because when I was trying to do some of the CTF challenges at CCC, I was trying to use Pwn tools on Python 3 and it actually didn't work. I kept encountering issues, so I had
Okay,
to
maybe
use
there's a
Python 2.
fork then that does Python 3. So I'm
Yeah,
pretty
it
sure
might
there's
be.
support on it. Maybe it's not officially through them, but that's at least one thing I remember. Definitely encountering with that. But yeah, I've kind of similar. The last couple years, I've been trying to do most things with Python 3, and it's improved. Definitely in the last like six to 12 months for sure.
Yeah.
That said, I mean they are sunsetting it. It's not dead yet. There is going to be a April kind of last release.
Okay, I was going to say, is there an official kill date past the sunset? Okay, there is, so around April. I didn't see that in there, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was here or if it's in check Python news.
Yeah. But I mean, in general, I think the grace period was very generous. I think it's fair that they want people to, go to Python 3 now, and that they're kind of, starting to finally kill off Python 2, just cuz like maintaining both of them does kind of suck, and kind of hinders the progress they can make on 3. So,
Yeah,
um
so I just pulled up kind of the blog page there, which Python 2 series to be retired by April 2020. Kind of where I
yeah,
got
okay.
that is there being kind of that last I guess last major version will be released in April, as they say. Honestly, I mean, I will miss not being able to do print space and what I want to print,
Yeah.
but I mean, my solution on that has been the overall better thing. I've just been using, logging everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I do wonder though if there are going to be people who use Python, even, or Python 2, even though it's like outdated
Oh,
or
of course there are.
dead.
I mean, there's still people probably running Windows XP. There's stuff in
Okay,
Python
true.
2 that just works, and people are just going to keep that working environment working.
Yeah, I should reword that. I shouldn't have said like if people will. There will be some people who will, but I wonder how many people will. Like, I think most things will move to Python 3. Uh if they haven't already. So, yeah, that was just something I was kind of thinking about. But yeah,
Or,
and
Golang or something will pop up in its place. I mean, I'm kind of reminded with, what was it, Perl 6? Kind of had some significant changes people weren't too happy with. I mean, there's still kind of a lot of people that I think it was Perl 6. I haven't been a heavy Perl user in quite a while, but I mean, there's definitely kind of the chance of that where people either just stick with the older version or move right away from Python 2.
yeah. Okay, yeah. I mean, I am a big fan of Golang. I'll shill for that. But yeah, kind of end of an era there with Python 2
Yeah,
finally
definitely.
sunsetting. Yeah. So Kali Linux, the favorite meme of our industry, I guess. So they put out a bit of a news thing saying that New Year's is a good time for major changes, and in that spirit, they've announced a major change in the security model for Kali Linux for the 2020.1 release, and that overhaul is default non-root user.
Yeah,
So
definitely a good move. I mean, for the longest time, when I always hear about, kids are wanting to install, and I realize it's not just kids, but I'll use that anyhow. But installing Kali as their main operating system, it, it is not generally not a good idea to do that. And one of the big reasons that I've always pointed to is the fact that you've got that root user by default, and defaults matter. People will use the default. One of the first comments on this chain, actually, or at least one of the first ones, yeah, that's great, but if somebody does not know how to create a user, maybe they shouldn't be using Kali, which is definitely true. But just because it's so much easier to not go and create one, there are a lot of people who just use the default, use what's there. Um, so I mean, just having a sane default, I think, matters, even if people should know to create their own user anyhow.
Yeah. I mean, I do kind of wonder, like, you're right that secure defaults matter. And that, obviously if people are rolling this, like Kali is their main OS for some dumb reason, uh, you know, that default non-root user is good in terms of security. But I feel like that's almost encouraging people to use it as more of a desktop than what it's actually for. Because, like, Kali is more like, when I think of Kali, I think of, like, sticking it on a USB live stick, and, if you're a pen tester, taking it with you and using it on the road. It's not like a desktop main daily driver OS.
Yeah, but
Um,
I think they're trying to push towards that because that is simply kind of where a lot of people are using it. If you actually kind of read their news posts there, they kind of go into a little bit more detail about why they've made that change. And if I recall, I just kind of scanned over this, but I mean, it sounds like they are trying to move towards making it a more practical system to just install. They don't encourage it, but yeah, here it is. While we don't encourage people to run Kali as their day-to-day operating system over the last few years, more and more users have started to do so. Even if they are not using it to do penetration testing full time. Apparently including members of the Kali development team, although kind of makes sense that they, dogfeed it,
yeah,
so that's cool.
yeah. I mean, I'll hijack this news as a little bit of an opportunity to talk a little bit about Kali. Maybe we can go into a more in-depth discussion later. But I'm not sure what the obsession is with Kali. It's a Linux distro with a bunch of tools pre-installed that most of them you'll probably not use anyway.
No,
I
but
don't know why people have a problem with like setting up something like Ubuntu and just installing the tools they need as they need them.
the thing is, installing the tools you need as you need it requires effort. It requires work to do the research to figure out what tools do you need. And to be clear, what I recommend for people is not to use Kali. At the very best, just use the Kali tool list if you really need to. That and install what you need, as you're saying, like to do that. Like basically, what you're saying is what I recommend people do is manually install stuff, know kind of what they're doing. Um, as I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name. I'm sorry, but yeah, for CTFs, like there's a ton of cases where Kali is useful. It's like either in a VM, quickly spin it up, use it on CTFs. It's got all the tools there. It's great kind of in the professional context, as Spectre said too, where you're rolling into a client site. They're going to provide you a machine. Maybe you're doing an engagement where you're pretending to be like a new employee who's already in there who's going to be a rogue employee, something like that, or social engineering your way in, you're going to get a computer. So you pop in the disk. Granted, a lot of machines now don't even seem to do the disk drive, so you pop in USB, but you get that idea. You use that locally. There's a ton of use cases for Kali, but we're definitely just talking about why people are doing it as a local install main operating system. Dual booting I think is a little bit different too. I always hated dual booting personally.
Really?
Uh,
Okay, this is actually the first I've heard about this, so I'm curious.
well,
Why don't you like dual booting?
just because of the whole context switch. It's not that I have any issue with people who dual boot, but personally, it's just you've got that whole mental switch. You've got that whole context switch going on when you turn the computer off, turn it back on, you boot into whatever else you want to use. Like needing to do that whole process. So I always just favor VMs for that because it's more efficient to me. But just jumping back, what I want to get at is I tend to recommend people just figure out what tools they need via research. It takes longer, it's more effort. But the key thing that you get out of that is you know what tools are available and you know what tools um, you're actually going to use and how to use them. You end up doing a lot of that research. You end up learning a lot more when you figure out that instead of just going, okay, what does Kali have and what's already here for me to use. So I tend to recommend kind of what you were saying before with why can't people just go and install it. But to answer kind of that question, it's easier. You've got everything there. You can feel like a hacker. You can think you know everything. And let's be honest here, that is a big reason. Kali is the hacker distro. You run Kali if you're a hacker. There are a ton of people who know next to nothing about security, but they've heard that, they see that, and so they go ahead and install Kali. That's definitely a huge user base. You don't tend to hear about people running Kali as their main operating system, as like a professional pen tester who's just using it all the time. No, they usually have their own environment set up.
Yeah.
At least
So I
that's
mean,
my experience. I'm sure somebody out there will jump in there and be like, no, I'm totally a professional pen tester and I have Kali as my main system. Or, the same things can be said about like, Parrot OS and, Black Ubuntu and all the other options that are out there. Same thing can be said, Kali's just the most popular.
yeah, I mean, one thing I was thinking of while you were saying that was like, part of what you lose when you don't do research into the tools and like what you want to do is you're quite like, if you use Kali and you're just like, okay, I'll use this tool since Kali has it, you're kind of limited and you could end up using like an inferior tool for what you want to do compared to like something that could be like 100 times better, but you didn't want to put the research in to actually go find it. So that is one thing that I was
Yeah,
kind of
that's a
thinking
good
of
point.
when you were talking about that. In regards to dual booting, jumping back a little bit, yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, VM technology has gotten a lot better over the last decade or so, and I don't think there's much of a reason to dual boot anymore.
Well, I
Because
mean,
VMs are
sometimes
so
you just need
performant.
that hardware access. I mean, there are certain tools that, especially that work kind of lower on the network stack, for example, or need that lower level access that, you just can't pass through to the VM. Definitely happens. It exists. It's a reason to dual boot if you do that.
Yeah. So moving on to offensive security, which we've talked about before. They've made some policy changes, and was this just made today? Because I know we were a bit late on
Yeah,
adding this
so
topic.
I just got the email this morning, and
Okay.
that's the thing. We don't have any link here or any sufficient link. I mean, I've linked in offensive security, their main website, but yeah, they made an exam policy change, which I mean, from their email, which I won't show, but they basically said, at offensive security, we believe that one's health and well-being is essential to trying harder. Their favorite tagline. Recently, we've noticed the trend of students rushing to retake their exam upon failing, which inevitably leads to frustration, burnout, and a reduced success rate. So I didn't even realize they had a cooldown policy on their exam retakes, but basically, if you fail once, you have to wait 1 week. After your second fail, you have to wait 2 weeks. After your third fail, you have to wait 3 weeks. After your fourth and beyond, you have to wait 6 weeks. The new policy, though, what they've brought in, um, is after your first fail, you've got to wait 4 weeks. Second fail, 8 weeks, and three and beyond, you're waiting 12 weeks between attempts.
That is
That's
quite
harsh.
a, yeah. That's crazy. Like,
I
I don't
mean,
know.
so I think it's fair, to be honest. Like, I do think it's fair, but that's definitely a very harsh change to make. I remember a little while back, I don't know if we talked about it, but they did increase the exam costs, and it was a pretty significant change. Also, so I feel like they were trying to kind of curb these retakes when they made that change too, and that didn't work. People were still willing to throw money at it, so they've kind of done this, and I think it will help with people kind of judging whether or not they're ready for the exam or not. Because I
Do you
mean,
think?
oh, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, do you think it'll add pressure though, that people are gonna be more nervous and stuff doing the actual exam, knowing that if they fail, they have to wait a month before they can do another retry or longer?
It'll add
Like,
some pressure, but it'll also be like, okay, well, now I've got the time to keep studying. I know what I need. I mean, so the exams are definitely not something you should brute force your way through. But yeah, I mean, with the first one being 4 weeks, that is rough. I mean, especially because I'm sure there are a lot of people who do the exam, just barely fail, and pass it on their second time, pretty much no problem. It's
Yeah.
also though, I mean, I don't know, hearing like 3, 4 plus failures. Like I don't mean to just sound arrogant with this, but I feel like, you're missing the point if you're actually doing that. Like I've heard of people kind of hitting the exam with like 0 points at the end. And okay, that 0 points I could actually kind of understand. So, but I mean 0 points time after time. No, I don't get that. At that point, it's like you're just trying to memorize the steps to do something without actually trying to understand the concepts. So the same with like brute force and all that. Like it's not something you're going to be able to brute force. You need to understand the concepts that they're trying to teach. The key thing is they always like all the exams are like I'll even say like the exams are hard, and that
Okay.
was tough for me to admit, but
Took
like
some
I
effort.
mean there's some difficulty in the exams. I've only done the OSWE, the web app penetration testing one, and OSCE. So I haven't done OSCP, which is the most popular one, so I can't comment on how difficult those are. But all of the OffSec ones, like in my experience, they all had something in them that actually required you to show you understood not just kind of how to test for the issue, not just how to do the steps to exploit an issue, but actually had to understand the fundamental issue and how kind of that manifests and why it manifests. And then when you kind of get to the exam, the exam's going to have something, it's something that was taught to you. It's going to be the same issue that but that root kind of attack vector that requires that kind of deeper understanding, or as I like the term, grok, the intuitive understanding. It kind of requires that. It's the same attack, just different manifestation. In both of the exams that I've done, it's kind of had that. That's where I'm saying it can be hard. Because it requires you kind of actually understand what's going on. Um, Tackling one thing out of chat there. Oh, I heard the web app one was harder. Uh, the web app one is different because it covers something that's really difficult to teach. The OSWE certification test ends up requiring you to do a lot more of discovery and code auditing, which is something you kind of get a feel for with experience. It's not something that like you could just be taught a bunch of tricks on how to audit source code. In fact, they actually do a couple things in the exam to make it so even if you know a few of the tricks, it's not going to help you out.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't want to go into too much detail with that, but they do some things like that just, I guess, to throw, to cause some issues for you. So, I mean, I'm not sure if I'd say the web app one was harder than OSCE or OSCE was harder. They were very different. They're testing different skill sets. Yeah, like you couldn't just do grep to do as your example out of chat. Um,
I mean, I kind of like that now that you say that. That like, you said that they like try to design the exam around preventing people from just memorizing things, and because that's how a lot of
at
tests
least
are,
one
even in like real
question will
world
be like
school. Like,
that.
yeah, so I kind of like that, and I haven't really heard that before, so that kind of makes me a little bit more interested in the offensive security stuff.
Yeah, and so I
Um,
talk about kind of the exam, just kind of out of chat there. I talked about the OSWE exam during episode. It must have been episode 11.
I think it was our
It
first
has
one back. Yeah.
OSWE. Actually, I think it was our last one before we left.
Oh, okay.
But it
Maybe
has
I missed that one.
OSWE in the title. If you want to kind of hear more about my thoughts, I give a decent review of kind of the course, the exam there, because I ended up passing the exam like the first week that it was out. I had passed the exam, so I was able to kind of get on pretty early with having some comments on it.
Humble
Uh,
brag.
I just mean so you can kind of go back right to that point and find our older episode.
Yeah. So overall, thoughts on the policy change? You think it's better?
You know what? Because they've had issues, obviously, with people just brute forcing the exam, I think it'll one kind of save people money. They're not after getting a bunch of money, which was maybe the thought you'd have when they increase the exam cost. So I think this is showing no, like they care more about the quality of people coming out of it. And I mean, they've made a lot of changes trying to prevent cheating and stuff too. Honestly, I mean, I hate the 4 weeks. It seems like a while. It is probably better overall, though. Like I think it's a good change.
So you think it should be increased, but maybe not to the degree it was?
No, I think the degree it is, it's going to make people question whether or not they're ready a little bit more.
Okay.
I think, at least if they're aware of it. If they're not aware of it, it won't matter. But
Okay. All right. Cool. So there was something that came out. I saw this. This was a bit LOL worthy. There was Caterpillar padlocks. Somebody discovered that all of them use the same key.
yeah, so this is lockpicking lawyer, not just somebody. Decent channel. I mean, 1.15 million subscribers. I've watched a few of the videos. I don't watch it regularly, but it's enjoyable content. That said, I don't totally disagree that it's or I don't totally agree with you on, or I don't even agree with lockpicking lawyer on this one actually.
With
Just
what?
come. So one of his comments there, quoting the video here, is bottom line: if something is valuable enough to be secured, then you probably should be using a different padlock. I mean, all of these are basically keyed the same. In this case, I would kind of agree with that being a feature, not a bug.
Really? Okay.
Um, so now hear me out on that. Obviously, you wouldn't expect that, but CAD is, really construction companies is a big thing. A lot of people, so a lock like this would be used where it's a lot of people need access to something. And you just need some sort of security barrier to prove like intentionality or liability. I mean, the thing that kind of led me down thinking about that is just I remember as a kid, I used to spend summers out on my grandparents' farm. All their John Deere tractors had the same key. Tractors themselves, same key. And that just kind of comes down to the way in which people are operating around that, where several people just have the key and need that access. And rather than getting something cut because people lose it, whatever, it's just, in a construction site, especially, I can see a lot of people need it. They're using that padlock in there. I think it's just a niche application. I think there are obviously better padlocks if you have something that's valuable enough to be secure. But I think this does more just you don't want somebody accidentally doing something, accidentally wandering into your construction site. But I mean, if they want to intentionally get in, they can use the key or they can jump the fence. Like odds are the lock isn't the strongest protection there anyhow. But
Yeah.
it proves that intentionality and kind of keeps them from some of the liability.
Yeah. I was gonna say, thinking about it more, when you're talking about like locks like this, if somebody really wants to steal something, they're probably not even gonna lockpick it or use a key that like or buy a lock just to get a similar key. They're just gonna cut the lock. Like, it is more of like what you were saying, like a
Yeah, I mean, I
liability type
don't
thing.
know what the if that's like hard and steel or something. Like if there's something that actually makes that more difficult to do with this lock, I would imagine not, since they are keying it all the same. But yeah, the keying the lock is or using a key on the lock or whatever probably isn't the attack method that's going to be used.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Something I hadn't really thought of. I still feel like
Yeah, so well in
yeah, it's
chat, so
weird.
we had kind of this knockbox linked,
Okay.
which looks like they're all their key box. So it looks like they store keys and they're all keyed the same. I'm just looking at it right now, so whoever I'd link that, definitely feel free to tell me if I'm misunderstanding something. But that's what it looks like it's saying.
Okay. So is
And
that
in
a similar
that,
thing to
well,
this?
so I would say that seems like you're literally protecting a key. If you're trying to protect a key, you probably don't want all of them to be the same, like everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Although that is though another case where you probably have a reason for a lot of people needing access to it. So maybe it does kind of fit that niche, but
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me. I used to work at a transport company, right? And there was like a safe box with like all the keys for all the trucks. And then that was behind like a master key. So it's kind of similar to that, I'm guessing. Because
yeah,
like
that's what
that's a
it
use
seems like.
application example.
That's what it seems like from this presentation. Looks like it makes mention of, only your fire department holds the key. Obviously, anybody can go and buy the key, or I assume so. I mean, I know you can buy the key rings of a lot of the default keys to things. So, like, that exists. I feel like that's a place where it just shouldn't be getting used. I mean, because a key is something to protect, even if a lot of people need access to it.
Yeah,
At the same time, I mean, to kind of counter myself on that, your
you can make the same argument here.
your construction equipment's probably something to protect too, even though a lot of people need access to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, obviously, I know it's kind of the way things are done in that industry, or at least, like I said, within farming. And I believe like a lot of the CAD equipment's also just keyed the same. I think he even mentions that the ignition lock is keyed the same. So I don't know. I mean, my initial thought, like I said, kind of comes down to, the industry's kind of found itself in that niche of needing something to show intentionality, prevent, liability.
So I guess it's one of those things where it's just like it's
It's
kind
what
of
they
been done
do.
that
Maybe
way.
they shouldn't be doing that, but the
Exactly.
corner was already cut, so they are. Yeah. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
I'll have to maybe step back on my position a little bit there. It's seeing it being used with the key. I get that argument. That's a good point. I'll say, I mean, maybe I'm not wrong, but I'm probably not right either.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that isn't an interesting, like a good point of view to have though that I haven't really seen many people mention is that factor of like there are going to be a lot of people on a construction site that need access to it. Construction stuff is already inefficient as it is, so like it's one of those things like you said it's just been done that way, and then that's the corner's already been cut, and they're probably not going to change that. Even if Caterpillar uh, refactors their locks so that they're all different keyed, the construction sites might just go to a different lock manufacturer that keys them all the same. Um, and like I said, if somebody really wants in, they'll just cut the lock anyway. So yeah, I think that covers everything on that topic. Getting into some more sketchy stuff though, we have the Shitcoin Wallet. So there's some posts going around. Apparently there was a wallet extension for Chrome called the
Yes.
Shitcoin
Well,
Wallet.
I mean, that name. How do you even
Yeah,
trust it with that name?
yeah. I mean, yeah. Pretty obvious that it's sketchy already. So yeah, it was a downloadable Chrome extension, which is another thing where like if you're using a cryptocurrency wallet, don't use it as a Chrome extension. Get an actual wallet. Even better if you can. Like if you're actually serious about crypto, get a cold
Memorize.
storage.
Nope, memorize.
Okay,
If you're
memorize too.
serious, memorize.
But yeah, like don't use an extension. That's just dumb. So yeah, somebody named Harry Denley, he took a look at the extension and found that it was injecting JavaScript, and I think he said it was obfuscated, which is kind of a red flag. Generally, generally, if there's obfuscated JavaScript getting injected by an extension, it's not a good sign. And he found that it was actually trying to send off the password and private key to a domain. It was erc20wallet.tk, I think it was.
Everybody go and visit that.
Yep, everybody send your information to that. But yeah, like really, not much of a surprise. The name combined with the fact that it's a browser extension, uh, should be like a major red flag to anybody who wants to deal with crypto in any like serious capacity. And I'll just kind of hijack this news topic to say that like you really should do a lot of research into the wallets you're going to use before you use them. Um, like I'm not huge into crypto, honestly. I have some problems with it. I don't like it very much, but I
Yeah, I'm
have
not
used
a
it in the
crypto
past.
user myself.
Yeah, I mean, I have used it in the past, and when I did use it, I did a lot of research into like the wallet I was using, and all that kind of stuff to make sure that, like, it was trusted generally across the community. So I will say the extension has been removed off of the Chrome web app store. So you can't get it well, you can get it, because when I went to their website to do some research into it, they actually have it download to an installer. But from the Chrome web store, at least, it's been removed. So, bit of a happy ending, I
Yeah,
guess, to
I
that
will
story.
mention here also. You mentioned it tried to steal the credentials. Basically, if you created a wallet, and it tried to steal the credentials, but it also tried to steal the credentials if you logged into other wallets. That is one thing I didn't hear you mention there. Is it would try to log in if you had like My Ether wallet, IDEX, Switcheroo, NeoTracker extensions. If you had those extensions installed, it also tried to steal credentials and private keys from there. So it
Yeah,
wasn't
thanks for
just
adding that.
their own. I mean, they obviously tried to steal anything made with shitcoin, but if you're using something else, they also tried to steal from there. They only seem to have 625 users. So, I mean, that's a lot of people, actually, but...
If you're one of those 625 people, good luck. To do more research next time, I guess. So, yeah. We don't talk about crypto often, but when we do, it's often in a bit of a negative light, and the wallet
Yeah.
stuff is part of the reason why it's so easy to put out malicious wallets, and people, they hear about crypto, it's like, oh, this is a cool new thing, I'm just going to go download this wallet, let me just search the Chrome web store for a crypto wallet, and then they just download the first one they see, and then they get screwed, and it's like, that's one of the problems with crypto, is that
I mean,
it's
that
too
can
easy
be...
to mess with people on it.
They're, like, basically anything kind of digital of value like that, you can probably run into similar issues. Oh...
But if we talk about other things that use real money,
Oh, I know.
like,
Like, I'd
like a
struggle to
bank
come
or
up with a
something.
really good comparison
Yeah, like there's
because
nothing
it's
else
money.
that's...
It is like, or it's significant money.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is one point that I don't like with crypto. So moving on to some exciting stuff. There was the Edge Chromium bounty.
Yeah, like
that
the
was claimed.
Chromium version of Edge, so like the new Edge browser.
Yeah, I call it Edgium. So Edgium, new potential RCE, and I actually didn't notice this is the first one you said. I think.
Yeah, or at least that's kind of what's mentioned in here. I didn't actually go and verify that.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, it's a neat
It's a cool series
attack.
of
Yeah.
attacks. It's a little bit older. It's from Christmas Eve, but obviously we took quite a big break, so we do have a
We
few
missed
topics that
2
are a bit older than
episodes.
usual. Yeah, so it's fine that we cover some older stuff, especially like something like this. This is pretty significant, especially if that claim is true that it is the first bounty claimed. So this was actually a series of 3 bugs, and combined, those 3 bugs rewarded them $40,000 in Microsoft's bounty program. I do have a bit of a weird thing that I noticed. So they say that Microsoft is offering. They talk a little bit about the bounty program, and they say this means a single eligible bug in this new browser could be worth up to $30,000. Which I think we actually did cover. I think we covered the Microsoft bounty payouts in a previous episode before. So they say that there's a maximum payout of 30K per bug, but he has some pretty serious bugs here, and he only got half that. The highest payout he got was 15,000.
Well,
So
do keep in mind, like, he gets to the point of, actually, does he go? Yeah, he does inject a message box, right? That's what the final payload did, or was it just the script?
I think that's another topic you're thinking of with the message box.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's possible. I just found it weird that like some of these bugs, like, so we haven't gotten too much into it yet, but like some of these bugs were in the new tab page, which is pretty significant because the new tab page actually has higher privileges technically in the browser than other pages. They can access more JavaScript functions, more sensitive ones. Yeah, I just found it weird that like they said that it could be up to 30K for a single bug, but he only got like 10K and 15K.
Oh no!
payouts.
If we looked at what the actual payouts are for that, I mean, it's probably 30,000 for getting actual code execution, whereas this is your JavaScript and stuff. Because I mean, outside of the Sandbox is where I believe this one got to. Now that you mentioned that, I'm thinking of the wrong one. I might have
Yeah.
a mistake here, but what I do have here is, it's an XSS, obviously starting in the new tab page. Kind of talks a little bit about how they were exploring it and stuff. And basically, when you access, a new page or access a page frequently, you'll notice in this screenshot here that we've got up one of those little cards that it loads up. So you visit a site frequently, it gets a little card on your new tab page, so you can click it and go there. In this case, they have a test website that had in the title of the page, a little bold A or with the HTML for it. And turns out it was bold in this card when it gets injected in there. Why? Because, of course, they're just straight up injecting that HTML right into the new tab page. As Spectre already mentioned there, the new tab page itself is also privileged. That is, whereas on normal page here, you might have, access to like Chrome.app and, a few other things, whereas new tab page, it has everything, Bluetooth private, settings private. It has access to everything because it is a privileged page. So simple XSS leading to what they end up testing, because they're trying to find issues that are in Edgium, I guess, what we'll call it.
Yep.
So they end up finding this Chrome.q box, which they couldn't find any documentation about, so it seemed to be specific to Edgium. So it has this navigate. They kind of looked at the JavaScript for that, and now finding, they send it high ID and they send it a null, and it ends up crashing with an attempt to read pointer -1.
Which, he goes in to say, like, that looks like judging by the crashes, it looks like a pretty exploitable bug in terms of, like, memory corruption. That was probably the coolest bug in the article. There was a third bug. It was another XSS in the new tab page. It was through a cookie domain ID.
Yeah,
it was echoed into the page in a script tag, and it wasn't sanitized.
Yeah, he goes trying to find like a new, I guess, trying to actually exploit his XSS, but in a little bit more of a real world usable way than requiring somebody to like visit your site a bunch of times to get it in there. And he comes with an actual injection to actually do the navigation call and stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, the crash one where it tried to access the pointer at -1 was definitely the coolest one. But yeah, that first bug, the XSS and the new tab page, I'm quite surprised that even like wasn't caught fairly early at Microsoft. Like, he even mentioned he found that by accident. Like, that shouldn't be a hard issue to find, and that should be like one of the first things you would be thinking about securely when designing a new tab page, I would think. Like,
it depends on where they think the title's coming from, though, too. If they realize it's always coming from, perhaps they thought it was, Open Graph. Perhaps it was being provided, or probably is being provided to them by some other API, and they made the wrong assumption about how that data would be passed to them. Like, they might have just asked, like, hey, is this going to be passed to me is this going to be passed to me as like HTML encoded? Is it going to be passed whatever? It's like, oh yeah, it's going to be, sanitized, so just pop it in there. And then obviously being found in testing, it should have been noticed a little bit earlier on. Like, that is a slightly obvious. It's a little bit off the way, like, as a attack vector, but at the same time, there isn't a lot on your new tab page, so it is something kind of obvious. Like, there's nowhere else to look.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only thing that's user controlled, but it's, somebody visiting websites. It's unlikely to be an attack page too easily. But yeah, so he does find XSS, or a bit more of a usable XSS, or a way to kind of exploit it. Using a cookie being created there. Later on is his third bug. In terms of the values outfit, like, I think part of it probably came down to the fact that he got the crash, but he didn't actually go and show it was exploitable, or actually do like we got -1, which perhaps is only error code, for example. 0xFFF, being -1.
which is unfortunate because I think it would have been really like fun to try to exploit a bug like that in a fairly new browser, and it could have made for a really interesting write up.
Yeah, but I mean, not everybody does that type stuff too.
Oh,
So
that's absolutely true. I mean, browser exploitation is very hard at the binary level. That being said, like maybe somebody could try to weaponize that. I don't know if I'll look into it, but like trying to exploit that and see if you could do something with it, that'd be pretty cool. Get a outdated Edgium version and see where you could take it, just for fun. Do like a write up on it. Because browser internals are always fun to look at, and while they're mostly the same across most browsers, Edgium, this article even tries to go into some stuff that's it does differently from other browsers, because I don't think we mentioned it, but Microsoft will actually only pay out for issues that are specific to Edgium code. So if you find something in shared code that's overlapped between Chrome and Edge, or Edgium I should say,
then
then
Google
Microsoft
pays out.
Google pays out, but you won't get anything from Microsoft.
Yeah.
So that's why he was looking at some of these components. Overall, yeah, it was a really cool write up because it's something new, and I don't know if Edgium's going to pick up. I don't know if it's going to become like if it's going to break into the browser market and kind of impact on Chrome's market share. I don't know if it's able to do that at this point. Maybe because of some of the stupid stuff that's been going on with Chrome that we've talked about in past episodes, but yeah, it's cool. It's a new field of it's kind of a new thing that's happening. So it's some novel stuff in here. So yeah, definitely wanted to shout that out a little bit.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely kind of a fun thing to read. Like, I enjoyed reading this up, just the type of issue there. Not really what you think of with the browser exploitation. Like, yeah, definitely good little write up.
and it's very accessible too.
Yep.
So Keen Security Lab did a write up on exploiting the Wi-Fi stack on Tesla Model S's. So we love talking about smart cars and stuff on this show, but yeah. So they've mentioned for the last few years they've been looking into Tesla cars, at a bunch of different components. But this article they focus on a Wi-Fi stack which is called Parrot, apparently internally, I think. So they talk about what they uncovered doing research on that and some bugs that they discovered as well. So they discovered two bugs. One was a bug in the firmware in something they call the add traffic stream mechanism. And the other one was a bug in the SDIO interface. I don't have it in my notes what that actually stands for. I don't know if they clarify that in the article. I don't think they do.
So I kind of want to mention there that maybe I was misunderstanding what they're doing here, but the second issue, like, I mean, they got a CVE for it, so I think I'm misunderstanding. But let's jump back there. Add traffic stream with traffic specification. You basically tell it, hey, get this traffic stream from this other device, and when the device receives the add traffic stream response from that other device, it just copies that response minus header into a local struct, and then passes it on to the driver. Kernel driver processes. Kernel driver reads it. And when it makes that copy, though, all it does is response length -4. So whatever you sent it, -4 bytes. So that's it trying to get rid of the header. What ends up happening is if you send it a very small frame, it'll only contain 3 bytes. So 3 bytes -4 bytes is -1 byte, is a very, very large number.
Integer underflow, yeah.
So that's where you end up being able to do a large copy, which basically copies the rest of the heap over into memory. And then their attack kind of sprayed these pointers with that big copy. They talk about a few things that they're going to actually target in their attack, or a few options. What they end up going for is the MCU interrupt. And this is where I don't get... It sounds like they have, as you were kind of mentioning, the G interface SDIO structure. It sounds like they overwrite some function pointers in there and end up using that, and like end up calling that somehow. It sounds like it's an extension of this original attack, and there's not like a secondary attack except for the fact they were able to overwrite some pointers after their 3-byte shellcode.
It was written kind of weird. I think you're wrong. I think the second one is a different vulnerability.
Oh, I'm almost certain
Um,
it is. I just couldn't figure that out.
yeah, they didn't detail the second bug. They mentioned the function it's in, which is WLAN process CMD response, or RESP, but they don't actually include that function in the write-up. I don't know why. It's like they tunneled in on the first one, but then on the second one, they just... I don't know if they, like, forgot or something, but there's, like, way less detail on the second bug than on the first bug. Which is unfortunate. But both of them were heap overflows. One thing I do kind of wonder is that bug you were just detailing, the first one.
Well, but they mentioned wanting to target and getting something in the stack.
For the
Yeah, that's
second
vulnerable.
one?
Yeah, for the second one, there can be.
Okay, yeah, so that one I did understand a little bit. So what they were saying was this function was called in a lot of places, and I think the overflow was on a pointer that they passed in a function argument. And some places that called this function called it with a stack allocated buffer, and some of them called it with a heap allocated buffer. So depending on which vector you hit, you could get a heap overflow or a stack overflow.
Yeah,
So
I got
they were
that,
trying
but
to hit the stack.
But I was saying that in response to your mention of it being, or both of them being keep.
Oh, yeah,
That said,
yeah,
like, I mean, I could follow this thing through the first one and what they were doing with that really big copy. And then, yeah, I just kind of lose it from there.
Yeah.
That's it. The gist of it, they do ultimately get command execution at the kernel level from a remote shell, or like remotely.
It is really unstable, though. The first bug they say has like a 25% success rate, and the second one I think they said was like 10%. So not very stable exploits. I do have a few like weird things that I noticed in the article. One of them
Typos?
is no, like
Oh, I
just
noticed
questions
too.
I had, because like okay, let's say the heap one, right? The first one, the copy size, right? It was -1. It was huge. How were they able to exploit that without like just smashing everything on the heap and like causing a crash because of how much shit they corrupt?
Well, that's the
Like,
thing. I'm pretty sure they basically did smash everything, and this, like, I guess I won't say pretty sure, but my thought was that this is all part of one attack. And so they never actually returned control back to the system for it to go and crash because of everything they corrupted.
yeah, it's just weird. Like, it would have been cool, like, if they mentioned if they had a way of like interrupting the copy early. I
Oh, they
mean,
did. They do
they did.
interrupt. Yeah, they mentioned interrupting the call. That's why they use the MTC thing, is to interrupt that copy.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
And when you're
Um,
talking about the success rate, I just pulled it up here. We got about 25 success rate to achieve code execution with this method. I believe, and I think they talked about the 10 earlier. I think this is when they're deciding between using the MCU interrupts. Yeah, we mainly focus on this third crash in the handler of the MCU interrupts. And that's where the G interface SDIO pointers also mentioned. That's why I was confused by it being two separate ones or not. Um, because they mentioned the G interface SDIO pointer right up here when they're talking about exploiting the MCU interrupt, which is all part of that first attack.
yeah. So the other thing that I found a bit weird was they mentioned when they went for the stack overflow attack on the second bug. Obviously, when you're talking about stack overflows, one thing that kind of kills stack overflows in many cases is stack cookies. So it seemed like there was no stack cookies in this case, and that kind of makes sense because later on they note that the way they actually exploit this is just putting shellcode on the stack and executing it, which is another thing that haven't been able to do that in many years because of NX. And they say that
Well, this
this only
isn't
runs
enough.
Linux kernel 2.6.
This is, I was going to say this is an operating system, but this isn't. This is an embedded little thing. This is the Wi-Fi chip. It's not like your user land thing. It's a little embedded system.
But it does run
They're
Linux
known
kernel,
for
according to what
not.
they say.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of embedded things do and don't have NX or ASLR.
Yeah.
It's definitely not unheard of.
Okay.
There
But
is
like it
this
says it's
section
running
here.
2.6, which is like, is there a reason that it has to go so old? Like that 2.6 is a long time ago.
Well, because it doesn't have all the security features.
Okay.
More seriously,
yeah, okay.
it's just about the lesser performance and all of that. I don't work in the embedded scene, so I can't actually comment. But I did want to mention, in terms of kind of how they do the copy processing and don't like smash everything, there is a section here that kind of talks about the whole process that I've just kind of pulled up there. But and from chatting in person, I'm not going to try and say your name. 2.6 being popular, yes, you did just mention that, but you weren't talking about Linux.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, I've never worked in embedded either, so this is probably just ignorance on my part, but that kind of surprised me. I knew it was like outdated and it wasn't running like the latest kernel versions and stuff like that, but 2.6? Linux is up to 5 now.
It definitely doesn't surprise me.
Okay. So I guess you've worked with embedded a little bit more than I have, just because of like your work and stuff. So yeah, it makes sense. I was just surprised. That caught me off guard a little bit. But yeah, the bugs looked cool. It's always fun to look at car hacking stuff. I think the write-up could have been... I wish they went a little bit more into detail on that second bug. Like you said, it does seem kind of like they're blending together. Not sure why they didn't clarify a bit more on the second bug. But like the first bug is pretty cool. Like it's detailed well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I want to actually pull up the CVs here, because I'm pretty sure one of them mentions it.
Okay, so the issue was discovered firmware.
Well, I know kind of what I'm looking for here. Okay, it doesn't mention what I thought. Just one's a stack overflow, one's a heap overflow is all it really says.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so never mind. I thought it might have said something different. It doesn't.
Yeah. The last thing I found interesting was it was really quick on the fix. According to the timeline, they say it was reported on December 3rd, and it looks like it was fixed on December 6th. So it was fixed within 3 days. So I think that that deserves some, to be commended a little bit, because I don't know if I've seen a patch time that fast, especially on, like, these issues are a bit more, when you're talking about kernel level and stuff like that, it is a little bit trickier working with that, like in terms of patches and stuff, especially getting it through the pipeline. So yeah, 3 days, I think, that was pretty cool.
I don't know. It does say we report to Tesla in March 2019. Tesla already fixed them in version 2019-36.2. Where do you see the actual date on that? Or do you know the date for that release?
I can't seem to find the date I was looking at now. Yeah, I had December 3rd and 6th written down, but
yeah, no, because this was definitely a March thing.
Okay, so I must have had bad notes there. So I'll just forget everything I just said with that. Maybe I put a note in a bad spot and it was for another topic or something. Yeah, that's my bad. Okay, well, thanks for correcting me on that, because it would have felt dumb.
Unfortunately, they're linked to the advisory from the company that patched it. Doesn't actually go anywhere, doesn't go anywhere useful, so that won't tell us.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, forget what I said. Like Z said, they were in March, so that must have been a different topic. Alrighty, so yeah, our next thing is getting back to some fun stuff, which is exploiting Spiderman, Spiderman 2000, which is apparently a game. I didn't know that. I guess I was like 2 years old when this game came out, so I
was a bit older than that.
A little bit older, yeah. So it's a buffer overflow in file loading. So it talks about trying to exploit this game, and it seems like the person who wrote this article wasn't actually, like, that wasn't their original goal. They were just trying to reverse it to, make it run on other architectures and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to mention Crystal Gamer, their Twitch streamer, who are working on reverse engineering this. I do just want to give them a quick shout out. We're not all that huge to send people there. Looks like they've just done 4 streams. At least recently, it's just been their 4 streams basically looking at and exploiting this issue. And yeah, their goal was working on reverse engineering the Spider-Man 2000 game, as Spectre said, for it to kind of work on, or to be able to port it over to other systems.
Yeah. So while they were doing that, they found an issue where textures were loaded into a stack buffer, but there was no bounds checking. So, straight up stack overflow.
Well, I don't want to say textures. The file was called textures.dat, but as they indicate,
it wasn't actually used.
Yeah, textures.dat is a file that exists in the game's directory and is apparently useless, or appears to be useless, since the lack of it doesn't cause any harm to the game or experience.
So my speculation on that is probably something they were going to use, and then they refactored code somewhere that didn't use that, but they forgot to remove that code or something.
Yeah,
something along those lines.
That would probably be a safe guess. Extremely straightforward exploit here too, because all it did basically reads the file into a buffer. Doesn't actually care about size. So all they did was, write their dummy 4 bytes for the size that it reads. Write their shellcode, add a return value. There's no NX, there's no ASLR. Return to your shellcode, and away you go.
CTF style exploit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, this has existed actually before. I mean, there was a game, I tried to look up what the title was, but I couldn't find it again. That their actual update system, they just didn't ship an update system. So somebody found a buffer overflow in their news, like in the little news they'd give to people if they sent a large enough page. So they used that to actually patch their game live, or to update cool. their game. And I found a similar issue actually in Metal Gear Online 1 when I was working on that. The news loader in there has an overflow. I have not used it to live patch the game. I've thought about it. I've thought that would be a fun project. I haven't done it though. Yeah. But I mean, it definitely seems like it happens in games for some reason. And I do just want to say, I love kind of these types of attacks. I mean, you're not looking at this and really learning a lot. But I love this because you don't look at Spider-Man 2000 unless you care about, unless you've got some passion driving you to look at this. So I don't know what their history is with the game, if they speed run it, if they do something with it, if they just really, really enjoy it. But I love, seeing these passion projects. It's like there's no APT that's targeting Spider-Man 2000.
You never know, man. There could be somebody out there. But yeah, it's definitely more of a fun thing. One thing I thought was kind of cool too, and kind of adds to that CTF style of the exploit, was the file was encrypted with a symmetric XOR key. So, it was a little bit more complex than just a trivial stack overflow.
I did forget about that. There was that, and yeah. I will mention that Metal Gear Online, same thing, static XOR key.
Really?
So
common thing.
It happened. Yeah. Well, I honestly, running XOR is probably the classic way people think they're implementing a one-time pad. They'll usually add a little bit something, but oh no, I've seen XOR with a static key so many times, so many clients that try and roll their own crypto that effectively resolves to that, or maybe they'll do some extra little thing to seed their key or something, but yeah, I mean, it's such an easy thing, and it looks like it gives you good results. It's just such an easy thing to screw up.
Yeah. So, overall, fun article. Would be a perfect CTF style challenge. But overall, the reason we covered it is we just wanted to promote some 0 days.
Yeah,
we are 0 days for day 0.
Yeah, this hasn't been patched, so this is an O day. You can go use this and exploit all the Spider-Man 2000 users. I mean, don't do that. We can't encourage any illegal action, but it's there. Yep. The O day's been dropped. Well, I guess it's a little bit more than O day now. What would that be? A 10 day, 11 day?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So basically, we need to patch immediately. You know what? I think this person should go for a CVE.
Yeah, well, responsible disclosure too. Expect that.
Yeah. So, back to some serious stuff. We have the alert alarm SMS exploit. So this post was about a a system called Alert Alarm. I think it's a Swedish company they mention. So it seems to be kind of like a smart alarm type deal. You can unlock the door with like your phone or with like a physical keypad, and the way it communicates is it'll primarily try to do it over GSM, but it'll fall back to SMS. So they were interested in the SMS aspect and primarily focused on the crypto of the communication. Uh,
Are I'm sorry, did I miss something with the GSM?
uh,
Um,
they do. They
oh,
mentioned that
using
it's
the
there.
data. Okay, gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. Um, I had basically only really focused on that, but yeah, they do using the data connection over GSM. Mentioned
yeah.
that, so okay, that's. I thought I missed some huge thing, and
Oh, okay. Yeah, so they focus on the crypto, and that makes a lot of sense because for a lot of these systems, the crypto is like the main point of failure. It's hard to get crypto right. Most companies don't, and this company really didn't because they used AES-CBC, which we already know isn't a great scheme. It's vulnerable to padding oracle attacks and stuff like that, um, and there's no integrity checking mechanism on the encrypted messages. And then to make it even worse, they have reduced key space because where the key is supposed to be 128 bits, they actually only like they null out like all the other bits except for 4 bits of the key. So
well, they null
124
out,
bits
or
are
they're
nulled out.
all zero, like the character zero,
Oh yeah,
is
or
what
the
I
character
think it
zero.
is. I think it's the character zero.
Yeah,
And then it's the digits. I think it's ASCII. But because they don't use any sort of key derivation thing in there either. So the crypto, like I said, malleable, and it does require garbage. Like you sacrifice one block to control the next block in order to actually do that. And these are small messages of just one block, but you control the IV, so that's kind of your block to control.
yeah,
You can't. So you can flip. You can basically just flip bits, which is useful in this case. So if we actually go and take a look at what the messages look like, and essentially all they found was when they use this app, it created an SMS. And essentially, ultimately, what that was doing, they're using their app. When you want to turn your alarm on or off, it would create this little message. In the message formats here of like SMS version, I don't think they actually talk about what exactly that was. It seemed like it was always the same value. J, year, month, -1, probably 0 index. Day, hour, minute, user ID, and a couple null bytes at the end. Or perhaps that was more extended for user ID. I don't think they tried to use, 16,000 something, I want to say, user IDs. Probably didn't try that. Anyway, so they had that message size, and where they got that from is basically just send a text message to the actual alarm. So the alarm itself has a SIM card in it or whatever. It's on a network that can receive this message. They figured out what's in there, and yeah, so that I is literally ends up being I believe just a single bit. Might be a byte. I want to say bit. Doesn't really matter even if it is larger because it's either a 1 or a 0. So if you're able to flip bits, as you can with AES-CBC, you can turn that from alarm off to alarm on. So they did a lot of things wrong with the crypto, but the attacks aren't that terrible. So like we mentioned, that really limited key space. So that lets you decrypt messages if you're able to intercept them. And
yeah,
if you're able to intercept them, you can also do the bit flipping. You can, spoof your own also to change what it's doing. But you're not going to be able to send, like if you need to figure out what the um if you're trying to figure out what the pin is, because that's what we haven't really explained that, I don't think. It limits you to about 10,000 possibilities because it's all zeros and then it's whatever your actual like device pin is. It's kind of mentioned here. It's the key, or your actual pin on the device is your key, and then it's just a bunch of zeros before that. If you're trying to brute force that, though, you're not easily able to just send 10,000 SMS messages on pretty much any network. So trying to brute force that from nothing, like if you're trying to decrypt something you've collected, that can be done, trivially and very quickly. But using even a key derivation thing isn't really going to stop you, even if it takes like a second to calculate each key, which is what kind of is part of the benefit of using the key derivation. Obviously, just having a stronger key in general is the other benefit, not repeating zeros. But even if it were to take like a second, that's still just a few hours to try every possibility in decrypting. Like it's not really a solution that matters. Just having a better key generation system is all that matters there.
And not using AES-CBC. Like that's probably like the main thing.
I mean, if it was EBC, I'd be like, yeah, okay. Don't use CBC. I mean, padding Oracle depends on the padding itself. It's not just CBC vulnerable. It's the padding matters. You can use different paddings.
Okay.
Although with that, like say, if you have an Oracle, in this case though, you don't have an Oracle, so that's not really relevant here. You don't have a way to test if something decrypts properly or not.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
Overall, I think we see a lot of these crypto issues a lot in smart lock stuff, and I don't know why. These crypto failures, like, crypto failures are common across a lot of devices, like I was saying earlier, but in smart locks, I don't know if we've seen a smart lock yet that's like done it right.
Well, we wouldn't be talking about it on here.
Who knows? Maybe we would be. No. But yeah, like, there's not really much of an excuse for them to be that poor. That being said, though, I don't think burglars are going to be going around Mr. Robot style with like phones running Python scripts against people's locks to break in.
No, I mean, if somebody's being targeted, it could be useful. That said, it's like, if you've got an IMSI catcher, $1,500, you can recover the pin by intercepting one message. Like, I think that's where the big issue is, just that small key size allowing for the brute force locally of a captured message. That does have a barrier to enter at like, $1,000, $1,500 to get the catcher. That, I think, is the big issue here, because the other things, like intercept and turning off and on the alarm, intercepting the message and flipping what it's doing, the bit flipping stuff. Since you know the time, like, you can probably craft a message if you can intercept one. So the ability to decrypt, I think, kind of is the key to everything here. Like I mentioned, KDF I don't think's really the issue here. And he also mentions they don't use any key exchange protocol. I don't really think it's even wise to push for, like, he mentioned specifically they're not using Diffie-Hellman. So that would require, at least 2 to 3, if you want, like, depending on whether or not you want to fix some values, a little less secure, but it would require several text messages to go through instead of just the one small message. Like, I don't know, key exchange makes sense when you're trying to change protocols, but it doesn't make sense in this case, and I just don't know what solution to offer while keeping this rough idea. An SMS message goes out, it's like better key generation, like the key needs to take up the entire key space. And the app needs to be able to know that. So I think, like, my only thought is if there were some sort of, like, the initial pairing or something would expose that key out. So that would be a weakness, of course. It would be, but you'd have a stronger key that would be harder to brute force unless somebody happened to capture the very first kind of syncing or pairing with that device. Obviously, it's not Bluetooth, but like some sort of method for that. Otherwise, like,
I mean, you're right.
I don't know how to offer a solution for
properly.
them.
You're right. It's hard to implement like 100% secure, and I don't even know if it's entirely possible to do that. That being said, there were like a numerous number of failures here that were easily preventable, which I think is noteworthy.
Which ones are
And
you thinking of? The only
like the
one I
reduced
really
key
see.
space, like that's
Well,
one,
yeah, so
right?
that's
Like
what
we
I
talked
just
about that a little
mentioned.
bit. Yeah. Um, and like they mentioned like they don't use any unique like IDs or anything like that to you know
But so that was also a comment he made before he realized that every device was on a network. It was a decentralized system that you were sending these SMSs to. Um, you were sending an SMS to your actual device in your home, so it is a unique phone number.
Okay.
Which resolves a lot of the issues on the uniqueness, because you're not going to have somebody from like another system sending a message to your uh system, basically. Like everybody's got their own thing, so that is the unique target, basically.
Yeah. So they note that this is actually technically, I guess, another 0 day, just because it doesn't seem like this issue has been fixed. When I went to
Do
look at
they even
the,
have an update process?
that's a good point too. But I mean, even for new locks, he reported it. He said on July 10th. Let me just verify this because I was wrong on the last one, so let me just make sure. But I think he said it was July 10th that he reported it, and they were kind of giving him the runaround, saying, "Okay, we're trying to, we're testing some stuff," and then it got to November and reached out again, and it was just the same thing. Like we'll get back to you later, right? So it was over half a year. So he was like, "Screw it, I'll just drop it." So
Yeah,
this
which is,
isn't.
I think, is fair for him to do too.
Yeah, 6 months is a long time. It is weird that like they seem to be giving them the runaround. They don't really seem to be too serious about the issues. That being said, like it is worth noting with smart locks and stuff like that. These are deterrent systems.
Well,
They're
to be
not
clear, this isn't a
fail-proof.
lock, though. This is just an alarm.
Or yeah, sorry, alarm. Like
And one thing I just want to jump in really quick, since we moved off from the topic, but one of the other issues there, since I was asking you to actually name what kind of all these issues were, the other one is just a lack of integrity checking, which would stop kind of the bit flipping. But and that isn't really an issue here, because you don't need to really do the bit flipping. Like you're able, if you're in the position to bit flip, you're in the position to decrypt. But once they resolve that, then the integrity checking would matter.
yeah. So we'll cap that off and move to routers. So there was an RCE disclosed in the D-Link DIR 859 routers. So it was posted on the 24th. So another one that's a little bit older, but it happened while we were away. And the gist of it seems to be basically a command injection and a request to the router through the service parameter.
Kind of. It's not. It's in UPnP, Universal Plug and Play. Um, so the reason why you maybe saw that and we're thinking it's an HTTP is, well, another name for UPnP is HTTP over UDP. It looks very much like HTTP. Uses a very similar setup. Uses host, uses headers. Looks the same, but it's in a subscribe verb, which is not a verb in HTTP. You've got get, post, put, delete. You don't have subscribe.
Okay.
So basically, UPnP, obviously, it's over UDP to start with. Basically, it looks a lot like HTTP. Very similar. I'm just trying to find an example of the initial request here, because it shows it translating it to something that's more HTTP. Well, it's a line split key value set up there. You can kind of see the method equals subscribe. It takes the verb and changes the request for when it actually runs the PHP script, which is where the issue is. As you're saying, though, it is a fairly simple issue. I did just want to mention it's not in HTTP. It is in this other protocol.
Yeah.
But it's... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to comment a little bit on the article, because like you said, it seems like a pretty trivial issue.
Okay, then before you do that, I'm just going to finish
Okay.
describing what the issue was.
Okay, go ahead.
Obviously, command injection's already kind of been spoiled. basically, you passed in the service in the initial UPnP request. Subscribe thing, it had service equals, and then you would provide it the file name. And from there, one of which is it will split up that URL into a bunch of different values, into a bunch of headers. Basically, it actually translates some of the headers out of UPnP, just place them in there. That sends to the PHP. Shell file ends up being that server equals part. And shell file, it ends up being sent into written into a script that it ends up using, basically. That ends up executing the script. Should be somewhere in this file. Yeah, right here. Literally, it takes shell file, toss it right there with this RMRF. It's trying to delete itself, the shell file, and it's writing into that a little bit earlier. Also, fwrite shell file, but literally writes it in there. So you add a backtick, you add your commands, and it gets executed as part of that. Really straightforward RC out of UPnP request. So sorry, you were going to go into something about the...
Yeah, about the article. I don't know if you'll end up disagreeing with me here. I think the article is unnecessarily overcomplicated. When I saw it going into binary, it showed screenshots going into IDA, looking at the disassembly. I'm like, oh, neat. This looks like a binary level issue. And then it's like, oh no, this is just like, we reversed some of it and then we found this like command injection. And
this does not require that. I was disappointed by that. Now that you've mentioned, I kind of thought the same. Like, there's no reason to get into like the control flow graph and
like the disassembly. Like just because they are reversing it, and that is part of the process. Obviously, it's just it adds a higher barrier to the article.
Well, were they even reversing it, or did they find it and then look for how the exploit worked? Because they do kind of mention for a better understanding of how the vulnerability occurs, here's the decompiled source. Which could be that this is working backwards. They had the issue, now how did it happen?
Yeah. I mean, it's fair that they would think that they might want to include that just for trying to be, more in depth. But it seemed to make the article harder to read for not much of a reason. I don't think it really added much. So, like I said, I was a bit disappointed. I was thinking like, oh, cool, binary level issue. They mentioned sprintf. I was like, oh, is it like a format string? But no, it's just they're mentioning how it gets to the command injection issue.
Yeah, so. No, I agree. Like or at least I felt like it was a bit excessive. Like if you remove that, the article's pretty much just as good.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't add very much.
I felt cheated. But yeah.
Yeah, so, especially I did because, I'll add this to our talking points by looking at, these pretty pictures. So here I think it's something a little bit deeper, and it's not.
So Cisco had some issues. There was a security advisory posted. There were some vulnerabilities found in their network manager network manager.
Well, data center network manager. Yeah, like just data center kind of matters there in terms of the target audience.
Yeah. I mean, I read a little bit too far into the sentence there.
They definitely they had several issues. I'm just opening up the other thing here. Looks like from January 2nd, like there's 6.
There's like 7. Yeah.
Is it 7? Did I miss?
Yeah, I think it's 7. Yeah. Oh wait,
I only see 6.
Yeah,
there are more CVEs. Some of these have multiple CVEs, but 6 kind of root issues. And we're not going to talk about all of them. I did think, obviously there's the critical one, which is the one we actually have as our main link for this, which is an authentication bypass in a data center network manager. Sounds pretty bad, and it is.
And the funny thing was, it seemed like they had one for each protocol. They had one for in the REST API, they had one in the SOAP API, and they had one in the web-based interface.
At that point, it's probably the same code.
That's what I was thinking too.
Because it's an attacker could exploit this vulnerability by using a static key to craft a valid session token. That's basically all the information we have. And it sounds to me like they kind of have stateful session tokens. That is, because oftentimes there's a lot of ways you can implement sessions, but one such way is you generate a random ID, map it off to a file, database row, something, but it's basically just that session ID is just an ID, completely random, has no meaning on it of its own. Another option though is to encrypt, or I mean, you could just sign, but generally it's preferred to encrypt certain user values, user information, right in the token itself, and then you don't even need to do a database lookup, you just need to decrypt that. And that's what it sounds like they're doing here by using a static key to craft a valid session token. It sounds like you're able to craft your own session that, you know, has admin equals 1 or like looks legitimate or is legitimate. Stupid issue for using a static key that is apparently like across installs, like everybody has the same key.
Yeah,
maybe not. It's not entirely clear that that's the case. But by saying static key, like, I mean, that's how I would read that. I could understand if somebody were to read that a little bit differently, though. And
So,
yeah,
yeah,
it's... Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, just some stupid issues. I did have one thing that I was wondering though. I'm not sure if it was in this advisory. Was this one of the links you updated after we had it already?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I do still want to talk about this issue though.
Okay, so go on. I'll talk about that after then.
So the REST API and the SOAP API had this, which was the static encryption key. The web-based management interface is different. It's static credentials.
Even better.
Yeah, like, again, like, especially at data center, I mean, this is Cisco. They're not new to the game. Should know better, quite frankly. So do you want...
Them to the core of shame.
So are you okay if I go on to talking about the other Cisco issues, or was what you're going to say kind of related to that?
No, you can go into that. Mine is more like at the end when we talk about like the fixing stuff. So
the other issues, I'm not going to open all of them up here. SQL injection was another high rated one in game. It's all in the same application except SQL injection REST, SQL injection SOAP API. No mention of the web interface, so this does seem to be at least a little bit limited. But it's obviously still an issue. They don't actually include the details of it, so I can't even make a guess. Like with the critical one, I can kind of make a guess here about the whole static credentials, static key. Like, I can guess what's going on. All they say is the vulnerability is due to insufficient validation of user input supplied to the API. That could be a lot.
It kind of makes sense that they're a bit more vague with that just because of the potential impact. Where it is like data center stuff, I can see why they're a bit more touchy with like just saying there's an issue, but we're not going to tell you like almost anything about where it is.
Well, I mean, they do tell us the authentication bypass, though, is a static key.
That's true.
So, I mean, it just seems like a weird thing, but they do another weird thing that I think's more worthy of discussion, but just kind of wanting to run through these high ones quickly. The other thing, so the command injection uses literally the same line. The vulnerability is due to insufficient validation of user input supplied to the API. Again, one in the REST API, one in the SOAP API.
Yeah.
Now, where things get weird is this path traversal. And I think I will pull that one up.
Okay.
So the path traversal is the last high. So I was initially just going to cover the high issues. Like I said, it uses that same thing. Yeah, this vulnerability is due to insufficient validation. Like, I mean, it uses that same phrasing, but you know, this thing also has it in this application framework feature, which I didn't go dig into, but it's some other feature that it also has an issue in. Not sure what the deal is, but a remote attacker with administrative privileges can conduct directory traversal attacks on an affected device. What does that mean? Like, that's not a practical description of what's going on. Directory traversal could be a LFI style thing where you're getting access to read a bunch of files. And that was kind of my initial thought, like, oh, it's just that type of attack, but this is rated high. This is high. The actual CVSS score base 7.2. Yeah, C is high. CIA are all high. Everything's high. Confidentiality, integrity, availability. So high denial of service attack is possible with here. Files can be modified, and obviously files can be read. So there's another advisory, which is the XML external entity read. Now, so usually path traversals are read things. Obviously, you're able to write with this one. So it could be like an LFI to RC or something. A little bit more on that. The XML one here, though, generally speaking, again, there could be RC. Usually, XML entity is a read thing. Sounds like that's this case. It's got a much lower CVSS score. It's medium, 4.9, and confidentiality is high, and the rest are none. What I find weird, though, is this path traversal is more than a path traversal. Since this is high on everything, there's got to be code execution. They should be mentioning that this is a code execution. So this, I don't know, it feels like they're trying to downplay what the issue is by saying, oh, it's a path traversal vulnerability.
When you were scrolled down a little bit more, I actually did see mention that this ability or vulnerability could be abused to get arbitrary write, read, or execute on any files. So what you're saying sounds like it would be true. But like, if you can arbitrary write and you can arbitrary execute, then you have RCE.
Yeah, no, it's definitely RC. It's just the fact that they're naming it path traversal is what kind of bugs me with this.
It seems like they're kind of trying to hide that a little bit in the description. I see what you mean.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's definitely RC in there because there's pretty much no way you get high for everything without RC.
Yeah.
I guess there are ways, but you know, it's not what you would usually just call path traversal. You usually use the more impactful name when you would talk about vulnerabilities. It's, you know, not a LFI, but LFI to RC or something like that. Like, you use, I don't know, it seems sketchy to me how they've done this, especially because they do have that other one that's read only, and you can see that it's just read.
Yeah. So the thing that I was gonna kind of cap off with is, I don't know if you want to go into a discussion about it, but one thing I was thinking about was they say in the advisory that only those with like active contracts or whatever will receive updates, right? So in this specific case, I think that's fine. I think data centers, you know, expecting them to have active contracts, I think is fair. But it did kind of make me wonder, like, is that fair in all cases where, like, these software as a service type deals? Should security fixes be free, even if your, you know, license has ran out or something like that? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or if you want to go deep into that.
I don't know if I want to go deep on that right now, but so I haven't really thought about whether or not that should be free, because that is just kind of how. So basically, it comes down to offering support and offering maintenance as being a continuous service. They need to make money continually. Like, before software as a service, you did have just software you would buy, and then you would pay for the upgrade. You wouldn't get a free upgrade in the mail when things were on CD.
Yeah.
So I'm not bothered by that system at all. Even if they really care about security, they should offer security patches for free. At the same time, if you really care about security, you should also be getting the updates and, like, you know, willing to pay a little bit more for that. Or at least understand the risks when you don't want to do that. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have a very fleshed out answer to it or thought on it at this point.
I'm thinking maybe we can do like a later discussion video on that, because I think it is an interesting question that I don't really see brought up. It was just something I thought of when I was seeing this. Obviously, like, I don't want to go too deep into it, but there are some issues, like, the code base is going to be different. So backporting security patches, that is a lot of effort, and I don't know if that is reasonable to expect companies to do that. But it was just something I was thinking about when I was reading this. But I think that would be cool to go into like a later discussion video on at some point if we want to do that. So yeah, that pretty much covers everything about Cisco.
Yeah.
There was a HackerOne bounty that was put out, or rather disclosed, published, for Starbucks JumpCloud. So I'll be honest here, I didn't even know Starbucks had a HackerOne program.
I mean, tons of companies are just on HackerOne. Sounds like they paid out like sounds like they paid 30,000 out over the last 90 days, I think. Maybe 180. I think 90. But yeah, so I tried actually following up on this one a little bit. So it's a JumpCloud API key. If you're not familiar with JumpCloud, it kind of advertises itself as a directory as a service. So kind of think like Active Directory, not like a file directory. So it offers directory as a service. Essentially, centralize your auth. You get kind of a single sign-on. You sign in on JumpCloud, and you can access all these other applications that you set up with it. That's just it. So the API key kind of would let somebody pull out like user information, as is the example in this one where the key actually is present is getSystemUsers.go, which probably making the request to the system user list.
Yeah, so this is an issue we've seen before. I think
we've
even
seen things
like
committed.
Yeah.
That said, I couldn't like GitHub. As far as I can tell, Starbucks doesn't have a GitHub. So either in response to this, they just made their entire GitHub private, which would kind of make sense. But you do have the GitHub. I think it was just Starbucks. Like, you do have an organization for Starbucks that has no public repos, but you would expect if they were public and just closed, they would have an avatar. Like, they'd have some there. So this looks like just somebody else made it, in my opinion. No idea if somebody else did or not, but I can't find a GitHub for Starbucks at all, which just seemed weird. Like, it seemed like it's even possible that this wasn't really open. But that seems like a weird offering then on the bounty.
Yeah, they kind of say going through a GitHub search, they found a public repository which contained the API key. So
yeah,
like it just
I tried. So I tried to actually look on GitHub for any repo with getSystemUsers.go, and I couldn't find anything related. Like I tried to find something on this. Obviously, it makes sense they've gotten rid of it. Like, I didn't really expect to find like the file. I just expected to find something that led me to Starbucks even having GitHub.
I will be honest, if they fix the issue, why did they block out like like they did like the CIA style black marker over like the link, the GitHub repo?
See, well, I mean, obviously they also redacted the key itself. So obviously they don't want people knowing they've got a GitHub.
But it's kind of interesting, right? Like, if they fix it and they're using, like, they changed it so that it doesn't use like a hard-coded or static API key that's in the source. It just seems weird that they'd want to hide that. But that being said, obviously we don't know everything about like the specifics of the situation. I just found that kind of weird. But fair enough. I mean, they obviously felt that they had to do it for some reason. So
I mean, we've seen the redaction when we've talked on HackerOne before. I think one of the other we've seen that happen before. Maybe not GitHub links specifically, but the redaction and stuff has been there even in links before.
Yeah. The only other thing is the payout does seem pretty good for this issue. $4,000. I thought that was pretty cool.
I mean, the API key, like I said, this is to like the Starbucks authentication system. Like to manage the Starbucks authentication, if it's able to call like system users. I believe that's not like your you're using it for authentication. It's you're interacting at a high level with this API or with like their core API.
Okay.
So like it's a very serious API key to be leaking.
Yeah.
That said, I don't know for sure. I'm just kind of going by what I see here. So maybe it is more related to the authentication.
Yeah. So yeah, we don't have too much information because of like redacted stuff. But worth mentioning. Like I said, I didn't even know Starbucks had a hacker one, so I learned something today. So this was a pretty big story. This was published actually. Wait, why does it say 1 hour ago? That must have been the last edit time. Or no, 11 hours ago. Okay, sorry, I was misreading that. The time zone's different, so that's why I was confused. So yeah, it was published today, but 11 hours ago. And it was Google shuts down Xiaomi. Is that how you say that? I think it's Xiaomi.
I believe it's Xiaomi.
Xiaomi, okay. Xiaomi access to Assistant following Nest Hub picking up strangers' camera feeds. So I remember seeing this, and it was such a stupid issue. It was basically somebody just found it by accident. They were just trying to stream it and trying to use it normally, and they noticed they were getting other people's camera feeds instead of their own, which is like a serious what the fuck issue. Like, it's kind of crazy that happens. And apparently it was actually introduced fairly recently. It was introduced on the 26th of December. They pushed out some update to try to improve streaming quality for poor internet connections. So they say like this issue only happened to people who had extremely poor network conditions, and there's only, I think they said, around 1,000 people who integrated the camera with the Google Home Hub. That being said, I don't think that makes it better. I think this is such a what the fuck issue, man.
Well, I mean, so definitely, but I do want to kind of mention on this seems to me like it's an issue with distributed computing, and let's be honest, in distributed or parallel computing stuff, like it's hard. Honestly, it is. It's difficult. You think you get it. You think you understand, how to do all the locking and everything just right. You probably don't. So I kind of remember, like, back when I was in university, I took a course, Fundamentals of Distributed, Parallel, and I think something else was listed in there, computing. Essentially, doing this. And I figured, okay, I've done some of this. I was already working as a developer at the time. Maybe I was already working in security by the time. I don't remember which time it was I went to university. Either way, I had worked as a dev for a while, and I had a good amount of familiarity with doing distributed computing. And I still like kind of when you think you get it until you start realizing all of the edge cases and assumptions that can end up breaking when you're distributed. So I just want to say, like, it's a lot harder than you tend to think it is. So this seems to be some sort of thing like that, or at least to me, that's kind of what I'm seeing with this. Because kind of some of the important things is it would sometimes just serve black data or corrupted images. And the normal functionality is a live stream of data. Whereas even in the best case, the example cases there, it was just showing little stills from photos or from the streams. It wasn't showing the actual live stream. It was just like, here's a shot, here's a shot, here's a shot. It wasn't a continuous video. So this sounds like to me like it's just somebody got that wrong. And my thought is you had kind of two things that normally happen back to back, like a message is added to the queue and then this guy's going to grab it, or they have priority to grab it or something. With the bad internet, the wrong feed ends up grabbing it, realizes and just kind of rejects it, and then the actual connection kind of finishes and they get like this rejected memory slot that ends up actually being used for like a scratch space, just like it's uninitialized memory basically, for whatever reason. Kind of linked to that, obviously there's a ton of reasons why that could be. I'm just saying what it kind of looks like to me as basically being somebody screwed up this distributed computing. I think they blamed a little bit of caching on this, which is also a possibility. But I did want to use that as time to kind of talk about, distributed computing can be really difficult.
That being said, I mean, if you're, implementing something this sensitive where you're talking about people's privacy, you're absolutely obligated to. You're responsible for the issues. Like,
No, but
it
I
is
mean, I'm
just because it's
saying,
hard. Like, I don't want to say like we're like excusing some of these issues. I just want to make that clear. I guess, like you are saying, it's hard, and that is a fair point. But they are still
I'm
ultimately
saying everybody makes the mistakes.
okay.
And this isn't like it just started serving the wrong complete, like it streamed as if it were normal.
Yeah.
The wrong video feed. There was something else going on in the middle there that was leading to that. It wasn't just like it gave you the wrong feed. Like say, it had the corrupted data, it had like the black frames in there, it was stills, which I mean, as you were saying, it doesn't excuse it. Like it shouldn't happen, but I'm always trying to be charitable when I go through this, and it's like security's hard. A lot of times, like maybe it's incompetence, but I wouldn't be willing to say that without understanding the issue, because this looks like something that's just in a particularly hard area.
Okay. Okay. I mean, that's good that you brought that up. So it is worth noting that until the issue is fixed, I think it's still actually disabled. Google actually disabled the ability to stream using the Yaomi. I messed that up. Yaomi.
As far as I know, that's how it's. So yeah, they disabled actually everything from their app initially. As of this morning at like 5 a.m. Eastern, most things are back. You just can't stream from the Xiaomi Mija Mijia camera, which is the camera in particular that's got an issue. You basically just can't stream that, but other devices are kind of back online.
Okay, so that's a good update. So we'll talk about some papers. So JackHammer, this is our first paper, and it talks about performing efficient Rowhammer attacks on systems that use heterogeneous. Oh man, I'm gonna mess that up. But yeah, like basically using FPGA and CPU architectures, so they use both. And they tunnel in on two Intel machines, the Aria 10GX and the Aria 10GX PAC. I meant to look up what that meant, because they didn't actually. I don't think they clarified that. There's a few terms in here like FPGA. Okay, that's a bit more obvious, but they use like PAC, and they don't like that stands for something. I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I didn't really go into it. I mean, the gist
Yeah.
of this is you've got the FPGA. Essentially, they just launch a Rowhammer attack from that to the host system, or targeting the host system, and their JackHammer attack is more efficient and faster than doing Rowhammer from that host CPU.
Yeah.
They did that. I think it was Wolf SSL or whatever had a So last episode we talked about Belcore fault injection, or we talked about the fault injection. It was using the Belcore attack, and what was the other one? The Lenstra attack, Belcore and Lenstra. Exact same attack. So if you want to kind of know a little bit more about the actual fault attack, it's on the last episode. Okay. But basically that's what they use the Rowhammer for, and the gist of it is more efficient Rowhammer using an FPGA. I don't think anybody's really surprised that the FPGA is faster and more efficient.
Makes sense.
It's just now, with cloud computing and stuff, it's an issue.
Yeah. So this paper was kind of interesting just because it's trying to look at some like new stuff, right? These FPGA-CPU architectures seem to be kind of something new that's coming in, and they're saying, along with this new stuff comes new potential, issues. And that's like their core.
Yeah, it comes like less security now, because some of those assumptions about the isolation is no longer true.
Yeah. So I think there was actually one other interesting discovery. So they talked about the Rowhammer attack and how that could be performed more efficiently. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is separate. But they also talked about doing prime and probe style attacks to the CPU's last level cache. Because they were saying like these.
Yeah, they talk about the caching as part of just as part of the types of attacks that you can do with this. It was in the background.
Yeah, so they mentioned that like it's resilient to most cache style attacks. They say it's immune to cache attacks from FPGA to CPU, but they say that prime and probe actually, it is vulnerable to that. And I don't know too much about this kind of stuff, so I could be totally wrong here. But my assumption is that's because it doesn't rely on shared memory. Because they were detailing some of the attacks, and they noted prime and probe attacks don't rely on shared memory. So I'm guessing that was like the why it was possible to pull off as opposed to some of the other attacks.
So I think we talked about prime and probe back in like I'm actually just trying to find it here.
Okay.
Maybe it was episode 11.
Yeah. So while you're trying
we
to find
talked.
that,
It was episode 11. We talked about prime and probe.
okay. So I think it's worth noting a little bit about how Rowhammer works from a layman's point of view, just in case people listening haven't really looked into it or anything. So Rowhammer, as I understand, it's basically just intentionally triggering leaks in DRAM between memory cells. Sometimes like you can affect the charge of nearby cells, and you can cause bit flips and trigger some unpredictable behavior.
Yeah, causing bit flips in physically nearby memory.
Yeah. So I don't think Rowhammer style attacks can be prevented entirely. I think you can mitigate it. One such way that people
error correcting memory,
refresh rate, and error correcting memory, but I don't think you can prevent it entirely. So it's not like a new attack or anything, but it's like an.
In this case, it's being launched from the FPGA.
Yeah, which is kind of new. So yeah, I think it's cool that we can cover this even just a little bit, just because it is talking about some new stuff in terms of like hitting it from an FPGA. But the thing with this paper is I think there is a fairly high barrier of entry. You need some background knowledge on like how memory caches work and FPGAs and stuff to fully appreciate it, I think. I struggled a little bit with this paper just because that's not my background. I'm not into the hardware stuff. I don't work on that low of a level. So I can't. I have kind of a layman's point of view on it, and I might be there might be some hardware guy watching. It's like, oh man, this guy just said something totally wrong or something. It is hard. This stuff is like it's a hard paper to like fully appreciate. But it's worth covering just because those FPGA and CPU systems are new, and this kind of touches on that. This next thing I liked a little bit more though, and that's the Shadowclone paper. So, yeah, it is a paper. So yeah, it's called Shadowclone: Thwarting and Detecting DOP Attacks with Stack Layout Randomization in Canary. DOP being data-oriented programming. So this is some research that was posted by a PhD student that was posted on the 17th. And the research is about trying to prevent data-only attacks, and this is pretty cool because we've talked recently...
Data-only programming attacks, which is slightly different from just data-only attacks.
Okay, but what I was going to say was recently we've talked about control flow integrity stuff, I think even as recently as the last episode. And one thing we always bring up is you can just avoid it entirely by using data-only attacks or data-oriented programming attacks. So this kind of talks about trying to prevent those circumventions. And the way they propose to do that is basically create clones of target functions and then randomly select one to execute at runtime to like check it. And then they also insert stack canaries at compile time into stack variables.
Well, so what's also important there is they randomize. So all of these clones that are being made, where the name kind of comes from, this Shadowclone, is that the stack order, so the order of all the variables on the stack, are randomized. So not only is it, that is kind of where the issues come from, are you have like 100 different versions of the function, all of which kind of have all the stack variables in different orders, so you don't know which version of the function you're going to get. So it does that at compile time. I'm actually going to pull up the slides because they were fairly straightforward to follow along with.
Yeah, I read the PDF, not the slides. I probably should have checked the slides out, but
slides are a little bit easier to go through. And I won't go through everything, but Yeah, they have the bullet points here. Generate compile time randomized clones of vulnerable functions. I'll get back to vulnerable functions in a moment. Insert compile time random canary into the stack variable. So just somewhere in the middle of they have the example here. They have the UN32 or canary just kind of added in to the function. So left side, sorry for those of you who aren't watching, but essentially just in between some of the stack variables, they've just tossed the canary in.
Which is pretty cool, like from a research perspective. It kind of reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you managed to see it. So Z and I, for those of you who don't know, we're in a reverse engineering Discord, and one of the people that we talk to often in there, Nspace, actually gave a talk at CCC, and this kind of reminded me a little bit about his talk. It's not really the same thing, but it's kind of similar in like how it's working. But his talk was like fuzzing binaries, and they kind of did like rewriting of the binary, at compilation time, and that kind of reminded me of this. I don't know if you managed to check that out, but I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, that it was kind of similar to that. But sorry, you can go ahead.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and mention. So reorders the actual variables on the stack. You can see on the left side you've got for 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, buffer 4, but and on the right side it's 2 canary 1 4 3. So that's kind of it. Does that reordering, creates a bunch of these functions. Actually, it can create a lot of these functions. Because what it'll do is it has either a threshold value or it'll go to the factorial of the number of variables on the stack. That can be a lot. Obviously, if I recall correctly, it takes the minimum of either threshold. So as long as you set threshold, minimum threshold or number of alloc A calls and factorial. So, a lot of functions can be created here. So essentially, when you're trying to do the data-oriented attack, you're overwriting just these pieces of data. You don't overwrite the return value on the stack. You don't actually take control of the code execution. You just go after these points of data, and you can do like a Turing complete calculation. For example, you can actually calculate things about addresses if ASLR is on without actually leaking an address. If you have some of the right gadgets to actually do that with the data-oriented attack. So it'll check the canary that's in there. You don't know which one's going into. So it's a fun idea. This is not going to work in reality.
Yeah, I mean they put out some pretty impressive things, right? They say it can limit success rate of attacks to less than 1%, and it has low performance overhead. But then they have the caveat when the program is small and has few function calls.
Exactly.
So this doesn't scale well at all. Like for CTF like size binaries, this probably works great.
Yeah, like so speaking about just the mitigation, it does a pretty good job. I mean, one of the issues is that it's only able to protect things up to the canary or after it. Like, depends on where your actual issue is. It may or may not actually offer any protection with the canary. You'd still want a stack canary on there to prevent overwriting the stored return address, but you still end up with not everything's protected, but because of that randomization, because of all the different functions, you don't know which one you're going to get, so it's all kind of protected because of that. But there is kind of that room
for exploit dev.
Yes, like this would be effective, but huge performance hit. So I pulled up kind of the slide here. 639.2%. That's a performance loss. So that's obviously with the H264 reference implementation. So like the media encoding.
Yeah, and it's all variances are like super high. Like they're all almost even.
Even like compress is 150.
Yeah.
bzip2 is 100%. Obviously, they've got MCF, which I didn't actually look up what that was, but they have their word count is 5.13% in the worst case. Or actually, all of them are 5.13. Oh no, a couple of those are negative. Sorry. So
So
performance
overall, I mean,
improved. Oh, so there we go. Performance improved
performance
on
improvements
WordCamp.
balances out. But I mean, I like the idea. It looks cool. It just sucks that like in practicality, maybe this will work for some small userland binaries, but this
So
will never touch kernel. This will never touch any major userland components. Which is
so here's the
unfortunate.
thing. I mean, stack canaries also introduced not quite as much, but also introduced as performance hit. And so the solution to that has just been targeting the right functions to protect, which is one of the things with this. It goes for every function that allocates anything on the stack. Every
Which
function
could be
that
a lot
uses,
of functions.
well, especially with people who try to do allocation list programming, so like never
Yeah.
actually using the heap. It's adding it, I think, to too many. If they could cut down, like have better heuristics on which functions to add this to. So say, only protect functions that have arrays that get passed into another function, like arrays on the stack that are passed into another function, or just functions that pass pointers in general. That might be a better heuristic to use. You do the function that has the array because that's the one that's potentially having the stack smashed on.
Yeah, like I think we should keep an eye on it in case there are any like performance improvements or anything that come later on. Like obviously, I think this is a PhD student. This is probably related to his like trying to get his PhD. So there's probably it's not ending, I don't think. I think he's still doing research into it. So if the performance could be worked on and like you said they could do better heuristics, I could see it becoming more practical. Um
So I won't want to jump to practical because, like I said, we've got
closer to practical,
we've
I should
got
say.
stack canaries, which are a heck of a lot lighter than this. This involves doing a random number generator call before every function in order to decide which function to actually jump into. It requires jumping through. Was this a big if? Yeah, it looks like it does it just as like a big if else. That goes from the random call. If it's not equal to 0, it carries on to control 0. Not equal to 1, carries on, carries on. Maybe using a lookup table could be faster. I don't want to
You
get
might
into
be able
that.
to do some
Either
cool
way, like
assembly level optimizations, yeah.
there is, and to be fair, this is LVMIR.
Okay.
So LVM may optimize that way. I don't actually know. May do that better. And this is just done, and then it has its optimization passes. Very likely. Especially because he does talk about the branch prediction and misprediction, so that might be related. Also to the basically to it deciding where it's going in those branches. That said, compared to a stack canary, this is very heavy. The other thing I do want to point out is they talk about detection, the security analysis, probability of attacker successfully delivering an attack without being detected. Um,
Yeah, I saw that graph. I didn't really fully understand what they were trying to get at,
so the
I guess.
PDF goes, or like the actual paper, I guess, goes into more with that. But essentially, it's without causing a seg fault. If you cause a seg fault, you're detected.
I think I can already see where you're going with this. That's not gonna
Well, the thing is,
like
like, people are going to be testing their attacks and stuff on local machines. You're generally not doing this blind. So this is basically like exploit stability in a sense, or success. Well, the actual success rate of it, like crashing or not. So my issue just kind of comes down like it makes sense when you're not talking about, or if you were talking about this being done blind. But the whole calculation doesn't seem to really work when you assume the attacker has the binary and knows all of the different layouts that are possible. Because that's what an attacker would know all of the layouts. I don't know how you'd go from all of the layouts to proper attack, because you still don't know which one it's going into. It's using RDRAN, so it's using like the CPU instruction for a random generator. So like I don't see the attack there. I don't know how you get that. But I don't know, using just a segfault, I don't know, this just seems like a poor way to define its security.
Yeah.
I feel like you could point to, the literal difficulty of developing an exploit.
Yeah. Overall, I mean, yeah, I really like the idea. Hopefully it gets worked on a little bit more. Maybe we'll be able to talk about it again if there's any more work done on it and published. Because, like I said, I don't think this is, the end of this project. So, yeah, we'll try to keep a lookout for it. So we're on to our last topic, which is breaking PHP's empty rand with 2 values and no brute force by Ambionic Security. I know you added this pretty late. I didn't really get a chance to look at this, so you're gonna have to carry this one a little bit more. What was the issue on this one?
Well, pretty much what it says in the title there: breaking empty rand using 2 values and no brute force. Okay. So for generally, when you're looking to break an RNG, random number generator, you want to leak the state. You get the state, you're able to figure out where you are in the state, and then you're able to predict the next values, past values. You're able to get all that information out of it. In this case, it's if you have not necessarily 2 specific state values, but you need 2 state values. And they need to be, for reasons, 226 values apart. But the gist of kind of what's going on here is you're breaking empty rand with only needing to get 2 values, not like 600 and however many values are actually in the state. Yeah, 624 values are the whole internal state. And I was definitely part of the mentions here. The consensus appeared to be that you needed to obtain the whole internal state or brute force the seed using part of those values to break empty rand. Turns out you can do it with only 2. They walk through exactly how this works. And they even include like code for it, the PHP code and Python samples for doing some of the same stuff. The math itself, like, I only really want to give this a quick shout out, not so much walk through the entire thing, but it looks more difficult than it is. I mean, the symbols, maybe if you're not familiar with them, will take a little bit of work. Modular, multiplicative, inverse sounds really fancy, but if you've, it's literally like a times b mod m equals 1 is the inverse. So if 2 numbers, a and b, mod m. So a and b would be inverses of each other, mod m, if mod m they come out to 1. You can Google it. It's not actually all that complicated. And they talk about kind of how the states scramble. They kind of walk through this. And basically, because the first 226 state values are calculated in a particular way, separate from the rest of them, that's why you need the 2 that are 226 values apart. You can calculate kind of from the scrambled state value that you actually get off empty rand. You can calculate the state value from it. So essentially, you get 2 outputs from empty rand, and you can break the entire random generator. That's the gist of it, but the practicality of this is you don't usually, sometimes you do, but oftentimes you're calling empty rand and you're calling it, say, give me a number between 1 and 100, 1 and 16,000. Not so much calling it to just give the raw value back out. There are cases where it is used. They actually show, like the case that kind of prompted all of this was that it was being used in an email token. Just added the empty rand value. That said, all I'm really getting at is if you're interested in kind of doing that RNG breaking, it's pretty decent write-up. I learned something out of it. I mean, we're seeing PHP less and less, but it is definitely still used, so might be useful to someone out there to at least know it exists.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, this looks like another challenge that could be like a fun CTF style challenge. So maybe we'll see it there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could add it onto 0x
Yeah,
539.net.
let's do
We've
it
got
then.
a challenge site, but I've already got the one empty rand issue on there,
That's true. That's true.
or technically two.
Yeah. So yeah, that pretty much sums up our topics. Yeah. So interesting note. I think we might actually end up with a final time of 2020. So it'd be fun if we end it quickly. But yeah, but yeah. So we'll wish you all a happy New Year. We're back now, so we'll be back again next Monday at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be starting the streams back up. I'm not sure if we'll start it up again this week. We'll have to check. But yeah, we'll let you guys know on Twitter. But yeah, so that was the episode of the Day Zero podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next week.